Hello and welcome back to another lesson on programming Python. This is lesson number 3 and this is part of the IGCSE Computer Science series of videos on programming Python. What we are going to be doing in today's video is we're going to be doing a very quick recap of two-dimensional lists, and I'll be introducing you to some new ways that you can output data and also look for, let's say, the biggest or smallest number or a particular name inside a two-dimensional list. And we are then going to be moving on to validation. But to begin with today, what we are going to be doing is having a look at this first section of code here. If you are not one of my students and obviously want access to these lesson resources, do drop me a message underneath this video. So what we have here on line number 17 is we have got a two-dimensional list. And here we have got 3 lists within inside that two-dimensional list. So at index 0, we've got our first list with 2 pieces of data. At index 1, we've got our second list with 2 pieces of data. And at index number 2, we've got our third list, again with 2 pieces of data. Now, if you look in the console window on the right here, we are outputting all of the data from these 3 lists. And what we've managed to do here is remove all of the spacing and also the square brackets from these lists here. And what we are doing here is we are using 2 for loops. So this is a nested for loop. So we're doing for list 1, this is a counter in student marks, and for data element in list 1. So we're accessing the first list and outputting the contents. We're then accessing the second list, outputting contents, and then the same for our final list here. Now we've got end is equal to speech marks, and what this basically means is it's going to allow us to output the entire contents of every single list until there is no more data remaining. This is a particularly useful concept when you are working with both one and also two-dimensional lists. Now, what we have here is another program which has been set up, which allows us to look for the biggest number inside each of these lists. And if we want to look for the biggest or smallest number in one of these lists here, we need to access each of the one-dimensional lists inside this 2D list. We then need to use another for loop to access each individual element in each of the one-dimensional lists. And then we have got an if statement set up. So we've got a variable at the beginning, which is maximum marks is equal to 0. And we're saying if marks is greater than maximum marks, we want to update the variable maximum marks, and then we want to output it. And here you'll be able to see we have managed to output the value 99. And this program has allowed us to find the biggest number inside this two-dimensional list. If we wanted to do, let's say, smallest number, we would just change this symbol around. Now, hopefully that is nice and straightforward. And what we are now going to do is move on to the second part of this program. So this line number 35, allows us to output the entire contents of a list. We looked at this in the last video. This next line on 36, this piece of code allows us to output a particular part of a two-dimensional list, and 0, 1 allows us to specify a particular index position inside this 1D list here. So this is really useful, and we looked at this concept last time as well. So when I run this code here, we are looking at student accounts. So this is one-dimensional. We can see there is only one set of square brackets. If we are looking at index number 0, and let me change the size of my console window so it's clearer for you, we have got user 1 being output. And then down here, we have got print student accounts 0, 1. And that actually allows us to look at a specific letter inside index 0, and we're looking at the second character here. So not only can we look inside each of the two-dimensional or one-dimensional lists, we can also look at each individual character. Now, what we're now going to do is move down to this program which has been set up for validation. And on the right hand side in our console window, if we run this again, we are being asked to enter a username. Okay, so it says, what is your user number? Enter in the format user plus number. So I am going to enter Rob11, and let's see what happens when I press enter. It says enter the new user's username. So I've entered Rob11. Let's see what happens. And it says enter the user's password now. So I'm going to enter a nice secure password of 1234. And we can see that that information has been added into our list. Now we get to the validation part. So it's asking me to enter my login. I'm going to enter Rob13. If we look at this previous list, Rob13 doesn't exist. When I press enter, it says username not accepted, and this is our validation. So let's have a look at what part of the program is doing this. So we have got login username, enter your login. We've set up a Boolean variable of entry is equal to false. We are saying while entry is equal to false, if the login username is inside here, we're going to print out the message accepted and change that Boolean variable back to true. But if the piece of data doesn't exist, or if the username doesn't exist in this case, we're going to ask them to enter their login again. So I'm going to enter over here, Rob14, doesn't exist. We're going to enter Rob11, we know that that does exist. And then it's going to tell us that the username has been accepted. So this is our first kind of introduction to how validation works, and this will actually allow us to set up validation for a program which explores usernames and also passwords. So I'm going to enter my login information, and then we're going to look for the password. Now if we backtrack to the password which I set, the password is 1234. If I enter a password which is not matching the username which we set up, so let's say 12345 doesn't exist inside this list, it should be rejected. Now this is, as I said, your kind of first introduction to Boolean variables. So these allow us to get a program to kind of loop forever and choose when we want to exit the loop. And it allows us to validate different information being entered, and in this case it is usernames and passwords. Now what we are going to be doing in the next section for lesson 3, part 2, is we are going to be having a look at how we can explore validation in a little bit more detail. So I look forward to seeing you in that next video very shortly.